The time is officially 6 g.m. This is the No Vaseline podcast at 6 g.m. Hey there, it's me, your host, Grace Marie. I swear I recorded this episode. I had no idea where it is right now, so I guess this is the second time I'm recording it. Yeah. But anyway, let's start. Have you ever watched The Hunger Games? Or read the book? If you have, then you'll know what I'm going to be talking about in a second. There's this character, his name is Finnick, and Finnick was hot. He was like very hot, and he was kind of like fresh. So in his time, he was fresh, young. So because of him being fresh on the market, the president, Snow, used him to get information about other powerful people in their country called Panem. Finnick was one of the tributes, they called them, to participate in the games called the Hunger Games. Yeah, where they fight to the death for food. So, Finnick was used by the president to get information from powerful people in their country. Now, when they say knowledge is power, they really mean it. All sorts of it, from scientific knowledge to the most basic things like colors, symbols, shapes, numbers, letters, words, codes. You get the gist. Especially the last few. Put them together in the right combination and you have a password. Use them in the right situation and you can make a message. Anything can become a special message or code in the right situation. That is exactly what we learned in Special Paper 1. If you are smart enough, you can use those codes and somehow pass the grade 7 national exam because for some reason you can easily comprehend stuff. A quick detour, apparently SP1 has been scraped off the syllabus, I think, something like that. Anyway, it's sad. I mean, imagine all those students going to secondary school without doing SP1 or SP2. It's like a rite of passage. But I digress. What I mean, essentially, is if you can understand the codes for different things, then you can decipher what anyone is saying. Like in Morse code, you know, the dots and dashes. People would do anything just to get a good combination of letters, numbers, and all these code words. Finnick would sleep with these officials just to get them. Other people kill for them. And others, well, they would run themselves dry just for one line of letters and numbers and symbols. Simple characters that, if you guessed well, would pay you billions. James Kamasanda knew that. Every Zambian official knew that. Intelligence departments all over the world knew that. Heck, everyone wants to know everything about everyone else. They even offered James good money to play Finnick for them. And while he was in that hotel in Malawi, he was in a powerful and dangerous position. He knew everything that the South Africans wanted. For this episode, all information is coming from the court judgment I found. I could not find anything on the internet about it, not even on online newspapers, because it takes place in the 1980s. Therefore, if there is something that I get wrong, do not come at me, just state your case in the comments. Also, if it was not a very big thing that catch the eye of the international news, then I will not find it anywhere. So bear with me, I had little to work with. So again, take everything I say with a grain of salt, cause some of it is just like guesswork, I guess, just putting two and two together. As with last episodes, show notes are available at novaselinePodstudio.com. If you have any information that needs to be corrected, send me a message and I will gladly add what I have missed out. But without further ado, grab your coffee, tea, or a sparkling glass of water, and let's get right into it. If there is one thing I have to get through my thick skull, is how you can be friends with someone and they would still sell you out. You could kill an enemy for them, house them for as long as they need, educate them, sell your assets for them, all in the name of freaking friendship. But a human being? A human will be your best friend and worst enemy at the same time. And I do not mean like frenemies like in the Disney film. I mean cut people's throats kind of enemies. Want to destroy you and your descendants kind of enemies. You see this where everywhere you find human beings. It goes all the way up. No one is above it. Not even the bilateral and legally binding UN agreements you see these presidents signing. Everyone wants to cut another person's throat. It's weird. One thing that I also cannot seem to grasp is firstly how common people from Congo are in Zambia, and finally how they always seem to be a part of such stories. No hate to them, I literally have ancestry from there, but the stories of spies, espionage, international intelligence, and all that sort have at least one person from Zaire involved, especially in post-colonial Zambia. For instance, in the 1980 coup attempt on Kenneth Kaunda, Zairean citizens were a part. Zairean businessmen took part in it. It is both interesting and weird. What is special about them that they are made to risk their lives for a life like Johnny English, without the comedy? I understand why white South Africans would want to be a part of this whole international intelligence and crap of such kind. I also extremely understand why these white South Africans were willing to lose some rands or more to get hands on Zambian security info. The plot twist I did not expect, however, is why the hell South Africans decided the safest place to coerce a Zambian is Malawi. Picture this. It's the 1980s, and the last 30 years of the 20th century in Southern Africa is the struggle against apartheid and getting free from the rule of the disease called colonialism. In my last episodes, I was completely confused as to why Zambia was so involved in the liberation of her neighbors. I asked a couple of people about it, and what they said made sense, and now I stick to it. Kaunda was thinking in the lines of, if my neighbor is not free, the white man might perceive themselves as having won the battle and decide to come and take Zambia back to what she made herself free from. When I made those episodes, I did not think of it in that way. That is because most people thought in the same lines as I did. He neglected the country and took resources elsewhere. My current opinion is that while KK was doing the right thing and not what he thinks is right, I still feel like it could have been better to try and keep the economy stable-ish. Remember, I described it as the economy was in the trenches, which it was. However, he did make a good call. This made the white people in South Africa and the white government of Southern Rhodesia hate Zambia very much, especially after they were defeated. Our case takes place in 1986. This is a very sensitive time in KK's first republic. A few years earlier, he apprehended some people planning a coup. At the moment, there is the liberation struggle, and the economy of the country is, like I have been saying, in the trenches. Quite literally. And now, corruption is starting to get more wind in its sail. In 1980, the Anti-Corruption Act was formed to combat rising corruption in government. The Anti-Corruption Commission, ACC, is the agency that fights corruption in Zambia, and it's still in existence today. To give you some light into this, the ACC is capable of summoning a person suspected of corruption. They could even get all your assets and have you jailed and tried, independent from the influence of the government. Do you know why? Because it is enacted by the law. It acts in its capacity as the law come to life. It's actually really cool. Yeah, if you think about it. And this gives the commission some powers. A lot of powers. The SEC launches investigations on many people who are corrupt, suspected of being corrupt, and people who have had any kind of contact, especially close contact, with the corruption suspects. Honestly, I think you should be more afraid of the ACC, Anti-Money Laundering Unit, and the Drug Enforcement Commission than the Defense Forces, frankly. Once you get called in, one of two things might happen. You could be arrested, or they let you go, and the chances aren't 50-50. It's more like 60-40. Actually, I'm being generous. 90-10. I say this because when you are called in for an interview at the Anti-Corruption Commission, they know exactly what they want from you already and where they will take you after the interview. This means that this agency has all the dirt on everyone, as well as the resources to gather information on people suspected of being corrupt, especially information from whistleblowers. The Zambian social studies curriculum does a good job when talking about corruption because it is something that we have been fighting as a country for years. So most of you already know what a whistleblower is, but as always, let us refresh our minds because it is a relevant term. A whistleblower is an individual who, without authorization, reveals private or classified information about an organization, usually related to wrongdoing or misconduct. This is according to Britannica, our favorite encyclopedia. Basically, someone who outs someone else is a whistleblower. In the earlier days, or like in the past rather, it was a term used only for public servants, but now whistleblowing happens in both the public and the private sector, and anyone can be a whistleblower. A whistleblower's identity is also kept anonymous, more so in an occasion that their good act could put their lives in danger. You could say that James was a whistleblower. Looking at his position, one could argue that he was, and the consequence of his actions led him in a very cold and dark cell, in a cold and dark time, and very tired and mentally stressed. He put his life on the line out there in Malawi, and all that he got from it was handcuffs and orange overalls. The Anti-Corruption Commission was only 5 years old when Captain James Chanda Kamasanda of the Zambian National Service joined it. It was in 1985, 5 years old. In those 5 years, a lot had happened. And like we said, the ACC had dirt on everyone. They still do. They still have dirt on everyone. So James, being someone who worked there, knew a thing or two about the stuff that went down at the ACC. In November 1986, the following year, he decided to go to the Eastern Province on a trip to get some money so that he could go to London to see a girlfriend. His friend, Paul Mbayangalu, a friend he had known for 6 years, decided to tag along so that he could get a car from the same place, Eastern Province. Paul is a Zairian and our link. Okay, just a little pause here. I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but Congo has had a bunch of names. If I'm not mistaken, at one point it was known as the Belgian Congo, then it came to be known as Zaire, then DR Congo, then Zaire, and then DR Congo again. So like something like that. I don't know how many other names it's had, but so many names. At this point in history, it's Zaire. Yeah. Not thinking twice about Paul tagging along, James agrees and they make their way to the Sunrise region of Zambia. The logic was they would travel together by bus, and seeing that Paul was getting a car, the both of them would come back to Lusaka in Paul's car. A great plan if you ask me. While they're there, James finds out that his cousin was not available, so they try to get the car now, Paul's car, and to start their journey back to Lusaka. Unfortunately, the car was also not available. It turns out that the people who are using the car were journalists, and they crossed the border from Zambia into Malawi. So they do the logical thing that most people would do and go into Malawi. This is the point in the story where I start looking at Paul a little bit suspiciously. Why would they cross the border with your car if they knew that you would be coming to get it. They decide to cross the border in a taxi, Paul and James. And weirdly, Paul has some Malawian money, like Malawian kwacha. He shows the money to James, and at first you would think, okay, maybe he comes here often, right? It seems that way. The border patrol officers seem to know Paul really well. It's like he's a regular. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt for now. So Paul and James cross the border in the taxi and make for Lilongwe, the capital city of Malawi, and they book rooms. They stay rather in a hotel called the Capital Hotel. Okay, as I was doing research on this hotel, I really like the pictures. I guess they're okay for a hotel in the past. I don't know. Yeah, it's still there today, so I know you can check it out. Alright, so back at the hotel, it seems again that Paul is a regular. I mean, if I was James, I would think nothing of it, because if this knowing Paul was only at the border, I would be suspicious. But at the hotel as well, maybe he's just someone who often comes to Malawi and stays at this particular hotel. They managed to get a room. After debating to get like 2 separate rooms, they decided we'll just get one and share. All is well now, they just need to get Paul's car. While waiting to be taken to their room, Paul receives a mysterious phone call. And it must be something that is secretive, because he walks to the other side of the reception to talk. Most of us have been in a hotel. A lot of people, or even just like a lodge, right? You just go to a public place and you look at the reception. The reception is not a small room. It is often quite spacious. This phone call is done. James asks who called, and Paul straight up says it's from Blantyre. Blantyre is another city in Malawi. It is the second largest city in the country, and it makes sense. Maybe the journalists who decided to drive your car into another country decided to take it to Blantyre. Then, as though he had not just said it was from Blantyre, he says, I lied. I got that phone call from Pretoria. There is only one Pretoria in Africa, right? And it's in South Africa. Why would Paul get a phone call from Pretoria? James begins to start getting suspicious of his companion. His SAS radar goes higher when Paul tells him that the car is within Lilongwe and that he would get it from his friends the following day. They get to their room and rest. All this time, James watches all of Paul's movements because something smells fishy around here, and it's not from Lake Malawi. No, it's not. It's coming from Paul. The next day, 10th November 1986, James asks Paul where the car is, and Paul is like, my friends, the ones who are journalists, took it to Pretoria. Firstly, Paul is a terrible liar. No one drives from Lilongwe to Pretoria in like 12 hours. And I'm just saying 12 hours max because that was just the night. Imagine travel time. So no one can travel that distance in 12 hours. The distance between Pretoria and Lilongwe is 1,434 kilometers, which could make a 21-hour drive. And just factoring in the fact that roads those days were not as great as roads now, Paul is walking on a thin sheet of ice, okay? James, on the other hand, is probably thinking, this guy is either going to kill me or kidnap me because there is no way he brought me here and he is lying this much. Sometime later, 2 white South African men come to the hotel. They are introduced as journalists and that their names were Gorge and Peach, something like that. You should, if you're listening to this, just check out the website and the post I make to check out their names, because these names, oh my gosh, I don't even know why I'm unable to pronounce them. Anyway, they're South African, like Afrikaans Dutch names, so it's not really a bother to me. So, we have these two journalists, Gorge and Peach. And guess who introduced them to James? It was our dear friend, Paul. Could they be having Paul's car? I mean, they really drove so fast from Pretoria back to Milongwe. I mean, that 21-hour drive done in like what, 2 hours? Does this mean that they are time travelers? I guess we'll never know. We'll never know. Well, James is about to be very shocked at what the journalists say to him, and you'll be shocked too. Alright? Buckle up. So, these journalists begin talking to James. I mean, small talk. It's just normal small talk. You know, you meet someone for the first time. Hey, how are you? What do you do? Oh, I do this and that and that. Then, they said some pretty daring stuff. Like, we want to buy some information from you. Okay? I mean, what kind of information do you want to buy? James, knowing that he is now literally in some messed up crap, goes along with the conversation, because who knows what they could do to him if he refused and threatened to, report this whole thing. Actually, not even report it. These men could be serial killers for God knows what reason. We never know. It's white South African men in the past. We don't know where they're coming from. So the South African men told James that they would pay him $1,000 per month if he gave them security codes belonging to the Zambia Air Force and the Zambia Army, and that this money would be sent to a bank account that they would open for him in Francistown, Botswana. Adjusted to inflation, guys, we do math here. Adjusted to inflation, that $1,000 in the past would be about $2,800 right now. And to bring it back home, that would make it about 65,796 kwacha today. That's just a rough estimation. That's a good deal if you ask me, by the way. Very good deal. The South Africans also mentioned that other Zambian security officials had been doing the same job for them already. So it's a whole mafia. No, not mafia. This is not even the mafia. Let me not even romanticize it for you girlies. This was some whole espionage crap going on around within Zambian security officials. Alright. So this information that they wanted was in 7 categories, and it was needed in 10 days. They made a final agreement that he would be given $5,000 for any of the information that he would give in each of the 7 categories. So he continued to play along and said that he did not have that information at the moment. He had to come back to Zambia to get it. The South Africans gave him money for a plane ticket back to Zambia, and the South Africans got James's number. Now, James is a really good person, okay? Immediately he gets back and reports for work. He reported this whole experience to the senior investigations officer on the phone, right? So, I guess he kind of called and he was like, "Sir, I think something fishy is going on." And then when he arrived on 12th November 1986, he reported it real reporting, cause at first you're talking over the phone, someone might not take you seriously, but then you have to report it physically. And he did this he gave his information, his experience to the senior investigations officer and other top officials at the ACC. He also reported to General Tembo of the Army, the Deputy Army Commander, and the Director General at the Zambia Intelligence Department. So all these people knew what was going on. A team of officers were assigned to work with James, including some people like Colonel Luvasi from the Ministry of Defense, Messrs. Membe and Po Halubembe from the Office of the President. So you see, it was a big deal. It was a huge deal. Everyone from every top government office was part of this, right? So they were all working hard to crack this case down. Together, they worked to find the officials who were selling information to the South Africans. Also, to get hold of Paul, since James left Paul in Malawi. James was given a plane ticket to come to Zambia. So, Paul was very much still alive and still in Malawi. This is the weirdest part of the story, if you ask me. James let his phone be wired so that the officers could hear the phone calls that he had with the South Africans and with Paul. On a certain day, James was able to meet Paul at Lusaka Club, and they agreed to go to Intercontinental Hotel where Colonel Lubasi would be. This is what James told the Colonel, that he would bring Paul to the hotel and Paul would be arrested from there. However, the Colonel gave James a 50 kwacha and said that he would arrest Paul on his own. But when James went back to the club to try and arrest Paul alone, because it seems like the Colonel was not doing anything, Paul disappeared. The circumstances of Paul's arrest are not really disclosed, but he was eventually arrested. So, after Paul's arrest, an investigation was launched into this whole ordeal to try and find out what really happened. And this was serious. The office of the president was involved, so no book wrapping around here. After doing the investigations, the officials concluded that they should arrest James and detain him because he sold the information to the South Africans. Then he came to report the incidents, hence putting Zambia's public security at risk. So, on March 24th, 1987, James Chanda Kamasanda was arrested for 2 reasons. 1, for attempting to meet with the South African intelligence officials, and 2, for giving away Zambian public security information. An appeal was made to the High Court for James as he felt that he was illegally detained, and after analyzing the facts, the judges were convinced that he was indeed being illegally detained. The defense and the prosecution presented affidavits, and here are some points that really stood out to me, especially. Firstly, there is the fact that there is no evidence that James did in fact sell the information to the South Africans. This is what the prosecution. So this is what the prosecution leaned on a lot in the beginning, but the court was like, we need evidence, and there is none. Because this is the past. Maybe if they had CCTV cameras that could, pick sound and stuff like that, but no, there's really no evidence of James selling the information. Secondly, apparently there were some documents that James had that could be evidence, and him having them was illegal. After analyzing the documents, the court found that they were just lecture notes that he was given by ZNS. So far, you can tell that there's something incredibly wrong going on, and that things are not adding up. But this was not the end. Okay, it just gets worse. James reported the issue of the South Africans individually to these officers because he was not sure who was on which side. But we leave that up for speculation, okay? So he didn't report to all of them at once. He was like, okay, sir, did you hear about this? Then he went to another one, then he went to another one. So, anyway, but that's up for speculation. A lot of the officers who worked with James also worked for his arrest. So, again, something really suspicious. Lastly, the most outstanding paragraph for me is the big claim. There's a lot written in the affidavit that is supporting the arrest of James. He said in his response that the only reason why there is so much that the security officials are saying is because they want to cover up for failing to apprehend the South Africans. And that some of the officers want to cover their tracks because it's true. They are in communication with the South Africans and they are selling information to them. The last paragraph of this is really outstanding because how could they manage to arrest Paul, the person who links up with the South Africans, but fail to catch the South Africans? I don't know if you guys are seeing the picture here, right? Paul would easily have led those officers to the South Africans. Moreover, going back to Colonel Lubasi's reaction trying to arrest Paul, if what James was saying was a lie, then how come it did not come out in the affidavit that he signed to justify the detention of James as a threat to public security? There's just so much that was going on here that didn't make sense because that man let Paul go free and blamed everything now on James. Why? You could, I don't know. I can't even say anything. I'm so shocked at how like things played out. Again, things in the past were always illogical, and we just have to deal with it. There's so much in the case still that is unclear, but the court analyzed the affidavits, the evidence, both of them, and came up with the final decision. The judgment was delivered by Judge Silungwe in September 1989. It stated that the detention of James Chanda Kamasanda was in fact illegal, and there was no evidence to support the reasons for his detention. I did not go in detail because you can read the whole judgment yourself. It's linked below, so please take your time, read it, and see how confusing it is and how confused I was. You'll be confused too. I just don't know what to think with this one in particular, okay? There's clearly no way of saying it's obvious who the bad guy is because everything is so nuanced, and the fact that the only evidence for the detention that was brought was none, a lot can be said about this particular case. I mean, some will think that James was lying. Others may look at Colonel Lubasi with a side eye because of his conduct and the fact that he's the one that signed the affidavit for James's arrest. Don't you find that suspicious? In the end, the court found that James was a good Samaritan who was just entangled in the good acts that he did. But there is somehow, somewhere, a cause for, speculation and more examination. I think that James was whistleblowing, and he just found himself whistleblowing to the people he was whistleblowing. I don't know if you understand what I mean, right? That being said, I wholeheartedly think that if you see someone acting in grave misconduct, please report it. Don't feel shy. Please report it. When you find yourself in a position to blow the whistle, I think it is important to tell the truth, because even failing to report grave issues like this puts you in trouble, because it's like you're also benefiting from the actions of corrupt officials. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Just because this story has I'm going to call it a good ending because James was let out of jail, we might have some very important questions for security officials from back then and those who are around right now. Are they really selling information and putting the security of our country at risk? I'll leave this up for you guys to think about. Everyone is entitled to think what they want. I would like to know what chap thoughts you have about this case, scandal, shocking event episode. And until next time, stay paired. We have come to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening. I really enjoy interacting with you all, so to connect with me, you could leave me a message here through Spotify for podcasters. You can send me a text on Instagram or on Facebook. You could also leave a comment on the website, and if you feel like it, send me an email. All the links are below. Bye!